Welcome to today's webinar, Geeking Out on Google Analytics 4, how GA4 can help you raise more online revenue. I'm very happy to be joined by Natalie St Amour, who's Director of Philanthropy for Indspire. I'll let you introduce yourself in just a minute, Natalie. Let's just dive right in. Google Analytics 4, what is it? Why are we talking about it? We're fundraisers. Why do we need to worry about all this stuff? Google Analytics is sitting kind of behind all of your websites, and it's watching traffic coming into your website. We call it Google Analytics 4 because they upgraded Google Analytics. It used to be called UA, Universal Analytics. We're not going to get into all the details around why we should care about Google Analytics 4. Let's just show you how we're using it. When I look at you, when I look at Natalie, when I look at any organization, I look at their Google Analytics first. And why do I do that? Because I want to see how much money they raised online. This is a client who raised $1.3 million in Canada in the last 12 months. And I can see the little peaks in their revenue right here. Giving Tuesday, end of year. This is what they look like to me through your Google Analytics data. And the reason this is important is because we can now start to sift the data to say, well, where did it come from? I see the amount of money. Did it come from organic search? How much came from email? How much came from direct paid search? We'll get into all of this. Here's a smaller client. Not saying that those of you on the call who've not yet raised 750 are too small. You're not. At some point, you're going to raise $1 million online. But if I look at a client that raises kind of in this $1 million online range, I see organic search being the main engine of that revenue. Second is email. Third is direct traffic to the website. You see this cross network? We'll get into this. This is called Performance Max. And I'll let Natalie explain a little bit more about Performance Max. The other ones are kind of nothing. Referral, organic, social, paid search, unassigned. Those are opportunities for us to grow digital revenue. Here's a medium-sized client that raises about $2 million, 1.5 to 2. Do you see paid search being their main engine of revenue? They've really invested heavily in their paid search program. Here's organic search. So between organic and paid, that's a lot of their online money. Direct is down here. Direct is when Google thinks you just showed up on that domain and you made a gift. Email is email. Unassigned means we need to track it better. And then here are the little ones. So you see the way their profile already is very different than the client I just showed you. One more is kind of a large one in Canada, 10 to 15 million online. We're getting more and more large organizations in Canada and the US that can raise more than 10 million online. Organic search is the big moneymaker. Direct traffic to the website, number 2. Email, number 3. Paid search, cross network, which is PMAX, referral, unassigned, paid social. You'll note these 8 titles are the same on all my graphs. The only difference is how much, the total, and then the distribution, okay? So everybody's got the same tools to play with. It's not like one client has a tool the other client doesn't have. It's how we use the tools together to raise the revenue. And I like to think about balancing portfolios. You know, with our retirement funds, we're always so worried about balancing our portfolios and having too many eggs in one basket. I'm going to suggest the same goes with your digital revenue. You don't want to have too much revenue coming from email because things change in email. You don't want to have too much revenue coming from your organic search. You want to have a balanced portfolio because in technology world, things change all the time and we can't control it. So you all remember when our Facebook ads stopped working so well. We used to love Facebook ads. We don't anymore. It's not that we're not going to spend any on Meta. We are. It's just way less than we're going to spend on Google this year because most of our clients want to raise money. That's our first primary objective. Yes, acquisition we'll talk about if we have time, but primarily we're looking at return on ad spend. So these changes affect us. Performance Max we'll talk about. It's an AI-driven ad platform inside of Google paid ads, and we love it. Today, I don't know if we'll say the same thing 3 months from now, but today we can't get enough Performance Max because it's driving such good return on ad spend. And it's pushing our ads out into new audiences that haven't yet known us or donated to us. So I'm really just kind of warming up the path a little bit here for Natalie. Email I worry about only because this is my inbox. I took a picture of my inbox from a couple of different organizations. I make donations all over the place. I want to see how people will email me, what their welcome journey is like. Here's National Wildlife Federation in the month of December last year. Just one organization. And at the bottom of my screen, for those who can't see, I think I took the picture from basically the end of November until December 31st. That's how many emails they sent me. Here is Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. The bottom of my screen is December 12th last year until December 31st. Okay, so you see what we're dealing with in email is just a lot of email. Gmail is getting a lot stricter on what they let into important now too, which we can get to. But really, without further ado, let me pass it over to the star of this show, which is Natalie. Natalie, can you take it from here and just do a little intro, and I will drive slides for you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Philip. I'll tell you when I'm ready to move on to another slide. I'm really happy to be here today sharing some of our digital results. My name is Natalie St Amour. I'm the Director of Philanthropy at Indspire. I've been working in development for probably 16 years now, mostly in international development and mostly in the mass area, looking at digital, direct mail, telemarketing, and face-to-face channels. Next slide, please, Philip. Like I said, I now work at Indspire. We're a national Indigenous charity that provides scholarships, bursaries, and mentorship, and so much more for Indigenous students looking to go to post-secondary education. Since 1996, Indspire has distributed more than $266 million to 66,000 students through bursaries, scholarships, and awards. We celebrate Indigenous excellence with the Indspire Awards so that young people can have role models that look like them and know that a different future is possible for them too. I know that we have some Canadian and some US people joining us today, so I just wanted to give a bit of context into why we use the word Indigenous. In Canada, that is the proper way that we have determined in our country to honor these people. We don't use the word Indian or Native, which is more common in the US. So we do use Indigenous to refer to what perhaps in the US may be referred to as Indian or Native. In Canada, there are lots of reasons why Indigenous students aren't going to post-secondary school. Financial barriers, geography, some of them live very far from schools. And sometimes it's just a lack of role models. They don't see people who look like them going to some of these places. That is improving thanks to organizations like Indspire, but we continue to try and close the gap to help create the next generation of Indigenous leaders. Over the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen some significant growth precipitated by graves being found at some former residential schools in 2021, which many Canadians will be familiar with. And it did get worldwide attention. So I'm sure some of our US participants here are aware of it as well. So as such, we've been able to grow the team, the revenue we're raising, and overall the impact we're having for Indigenous students. So just to give you some context, our development team is now 19 people. Half of that is a corporate partnerships team, and then the other half is working on individual giving. So on digital, we have 3 people now, which is relatively new. Up until about a month ago, it's been 2 people working on digital, myself and 1 other person, and then support from Stella. I also oversee and execute our direct mail and telemarketing programs. So we are a medium-sized shop, I would say, and I imagine many of you can relate to wearing many hats on a day-to-day basis. When I joined Indspire in September 2020, we were running a modest email program and we weren't doing much digital acquisition. We did not have our Google Analytics properly configured, and we weren't tracking much outside of our CRM. In 2021 and 2022, we ran a couple of very successful 2-step conversion programs where we generated a digital lead with telemarketing conversion, and we truly have had a difficult time replicating those results since. Next slide, please, Philip.
Can I say one thing, Natalie?
Of course you can.
When I first met Natalie, she told me about the success of this 2-step acquisition. She said, as long as you can just do this, we'll be happy. We haven't quite figured out how to do that, but we've done a lot of other things. We'll get to it. Is that fair?
That's fair to say, for sure.
Okay. All right.
So we started working with Stella in 2023 and feel like we have come leaps and bounds compared to where we were. We've set up our Google Analytics and e-commerce tracking so that we can compare results from our donation pages and our CRM to what we're seeing in Google Analytics. We still have some work to do to have them align and make sure that we're seeing the same amounts in all the platforms. But it's been really great to have these additional insights. What cities are most popular? Where are some referral sources that we didn't even know about? We've been digging into Google Search Console to see what are the most visited pages. We have this page called Words of Encouragement, where donors send words of encouragement to students, and it's a running list of these messages that donors have provided to students. And it's a very popular page on our website, among so many other insights. Before our work with Stella, we weren't using UTM tracking. As some of you may know, UTM codes are snippets of code attached at the end of a URL, which allows you to see where the donor is coming from. It helps you gain insights about where people are clicking and how they're actually engaging with your content. So we've started putting UTM codes everywhere. We can track new versus existing donors from our ad spend in Google and in Meta. And at Indspire, we're typically seeing 25% new, 75% existing on our ad spend, outside of some of the peak months where we're actually seeing a higher percentage of new donors. It's great because we can easily determine from week to week or month to month the cost to acquire a new donor, both monthly and one-time gift. We adapt our strategy based on what the data is telling us, and we're always trying to acquire at a lower cost to acquire and a higher average gift. Next slide, please.
And can I say one thing to the audience? We're gonna try to make this interactive. And so I see there's some chats and questions. If you've got questions, can you submit them through the Q&A button? That should be evident to you somewhere on your panel. And then we'll take little moments and see if there's questions, or if you want to ask Natalie or ask me something, we'd love to go into it and make this a conversation. So with that said, Natalie, next page.
Thanks, Phil. So June is a big month for Indspire. It's National Indigenous History Month in Canada, and also National Indigenous Peoples Day on June 21st. So here are the overall results from Google Analytics for all donors in June. So this is not just looking at new donors. And so as I mentioned earlier, we're still trying to get Google Analytics to match our CRM. So this doesn't match exactly, but it does help us see where new users are coming from and where we should be investing more. Anything you want to mention on this one, Philip, at all?
Well, I mean, to your point, the two main sources, there are a few main sources of data. Like Natalie's already brought up, what is our source of truth? You know, one thing that we find when we kind of get into this online revenue is, boy, it's easy to create new dashboards. It's kind of fun to create new dashboards. The problem becomes when we have so many dashboards, we're not sure which one to look at. So usually what we do is we look at GA4. That's our starting place because it sees the whole top of funnel. We'll talk about the funnel in a second. It sees where everything's coming from. It won't quite get the revenue right. It'll be pretty close, but it'll be a little shy because people have their cookies not tracked and they're using private browsing and all sorts of new technology. So we can't track everybody, but we can track 90% of the revenue. So we know that our revenue in Google Analytics 4 is going to be about 90% of actual. We always check back with the donation system or the CRM to see. But to Natalie's point, the reason we're looking is we're trying to get channel. You see that channel, the way she's got her data structured? We want to see what is driving the money for us in this month. How does this compare to this time last year? What's growing, what's shrinking? Because online revenue, it changes all the time. The tools we're using now are not the same tools we were using this time last year. So we just want to be able to say, what just happened? Do we all agree on what just happened? And given that knowledge, what are we going to do differently now? Okay, next slide.
So I wanted to focus specifically on our June acquisition results to just give some people some context. So we were really happy with what we saw in June around acquisition. So 40% of the donors, and again, June is a peak month for Indspire. So 40% new donors. We spent $3,800 to raise $9,700 from new donors. We had an average gift of $294, which is fantastic, and a cost to acquire of $99. So our return on ad spend, which is the metric Philip mentioned, we're looking at all the time, was 255%. 86% of the new donors were one-time gift and 13% were monthly. So that's a direct acquisition to a monthly donor. And we all know we're all trying to get more monthly donors. So we were really, really excited about these results. And again, given that we just started working with Stephen Thomas in 2023, this was the first time that we actually had ads looking to acquire donors in the month of June. So we're really, really happy with this result from a first-time spend in the month of June for Indspire. So again, these results are just based on ad spend and don't include direct or organically acquired donors. And we're able to summarize this data thanks to UTM tracking. So while the reports come from our CRM, we wouldn't have this data if we weren't doing the tracking on all of our emails, donation buttons, landing pages, ads, etc. So if you are running a digital program, UTM tracking is a must. One quick example I want to give you from something we've done an analysis on recently is email headers. So we send a lot of email to our donors and some to our leads and our prospects. And we have done an analysis and have noticed that no one is actually clicking on our email headers, which was very surprising to me because in the past, that was one of the main places that people click. So they're either clicking on the links on the buttons or where we have text and we have a link within the text, they're being clicked on much more often than the email header. So we're actually right now having a conversation about, do we keep email headers? Do we remove them? How are we going to set up emails? Because we're actually seeing from the data that people are not clicking on the headers. Next slide, please.
Can I add?
Of course you can.
Okay, so just a couple of clarifications. Like, as Natalie's talking, she'll refer to me as Stella and as Stephen Thomas. And and I'll get into that. Stella is the new digital part of the agency at Stephen Thomas ST Limited. And I think Steve may even be on the call. I saw him in the guest list. So hopefully we're doing right by you, Steve, with this. The question I often get is, can we actually use digital to acquire new monthly donors? It's kind of like, can we actually do that? The answer is 100% yes. And if you look at the cost to acquire a monthly donor in digital compared to face-to-face, you'll fall out of your chair. Now, we'll get to this. There's going to be a scale issue. If what you want to do is deliver to your board thousands and thousands of new monthly donors each month, you're going to have to use face-to-face. We just need a bigger audience. If you're willing to wait a little while and grow that program a little more organically, we can use digital very effectively. So I just want to kind of underline a couple of points Natalie was making there. Okay.
So this is a snapshot of our Fundraise Up, the back end of our Fundraise Up donation pages. So we again started using Fundraise Up donation pages in September 2023. And we love all the insights we can see from different campaigns. And now we're actually getting to the point where we can compare year-over-year results, which is really exciting. We also use the same naming conventions between Fundraise Up and UTM tracking and Google Analytics so that we can easily compare if the results match. We try and keep the data organized on both platforms to make it as easy as possible to analyze. So you can see some of the campaigns that we've named, and you can actually see some peaks through the month of June where we raised more money. Next slide, please.
And notice as I'm shifting slides, in Fundraise Up, these are the campaign names. In Google Analytics, these are the item names. They are the same names, which is unbelievably helpful if you're trying to tease apart what just happened, is that we know which campaigns are driving which revenues from email versus organic search versus paid. And I won't take any more from you on this page.
No
it's
worries.
Your page, Natalie.
So truly, Philip, all I was going to say is exactly what you just said. I wanted to be able to show people the difference between how we code or label things in Fundraise Up and how it's similar in Google Analytics. Because again, you want to make sure those are matching so that you can easily identify what campaign is what campaign. And if you have anything else to add, I don't have anything else for this one.
Well, we mentioned Fundraise Up. I mean, we love our friends at Fundraise Up because their tools are so easy to use and because they convert so well. And so, put in a little plug for Fundraise Up. We'll come back to it and you can ask questions about it. But Fundraise Up is a modern donation platform that's AI-based. So it's going to suggest giving amounts to people based on all sorts of non-PII, personal identifiable information that the web can see. The version of my iPhone, the time of day, the location I am in Toronto. And it's going to create suggested giving amounts based on that. And it's going to use AI to try to nudge me into becoming a monthly donor. Many nice little nudges along the way. And we're seeing it's very effective if we're trying to acquire new audience for Indspire, to use paid ads in combination with Fundraise Up, to generate a flow of funnel into that donation form and then have that donation form do the work to maximize that average gift and maximize the number of donors that become monthly. So I will just put that little plug in there for Fundraise Up.
And I will add to that, Philip, just that we actually have seen an increase in the number of donors we're converting online to monthly directly. And overall, our monthly revenue is continuing to grow. And we know that that is in huge part to the platform because we didn't have a platform where we had all these little prompts to encourage people to consider a monthly gift. And so it's definitely making a difference in our results. Performance Max. So Philip did talk a little bit about this. So this is one area we've seen consistently good return on investment. And so Performance Max, again, is the AI, is Google's AI ad system where it looks to optimize the content that you put into Google. It helps you drive performance based on what your specified conversion goals are, delivering more conversions and value by optimizing performance in real time. So from September 2023 to July 2024, we saw a return on ad spend of $9.80 for every dollar we spent. So if you click to the next slide, Philip, there is a summary of those results because I just wanted to dig into it a little bit more and give people a sense. And again, we're a medium-sized shop. So if you're a large shop, you'll probably see a lot more than this. If you're a smaller shop, perhaps a little less than this. But we raised over $209,000 and only spent around $21,000. And this is specifically looking at new donors. And so, oh, sorry, no, it is not. It's a mix of new and existing donors. And so if you are not currently using Performance Max, I highly recommend that you consider this. You absolutely want to make sure your Google Analytics account is in order first. So make sure you're tracking e-commerce, make sure your Google Search Console is in order. You want to make sure everything is tracking properly. Otherwise, you won't be able to see these insights. Anything to add here, Philip?
Well, as a fundraiser, did you ever think you would be talking about Performance Max and bottom of funnel conversions? And I mean, this is a whole new language for fundraisers in 2024. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yes, it is.
And you've adapted wonderfully. I mean, Natalie is a fundraiser, and I would say pure and simple, she just wants us to raise money. Like at the end of the day, it's like just raise money, and hopefully from new audiences too, not just donors who are already in the database. And so these are kind of like new words, new skill sets, but they're not so technical. I kind of want to try to lower the fear that some of you may have if you don't know these words or you don't think you're techie. You don't have to be super techie these days. These systems are very easy to use. Performance Max, what we always recommend with Google, I mean, usually what we do is we come into an organization and we switch up the spend mix. We look at the mix of digital ad spend, and we usually take away from Meta and we give it to Google. Not always, but usually a client is overspending on Meta and underspending on Google. That's a gross generalization. Inside of Google, we want to spend on paid search and PMax because they do two different things in the funnel. And fun fact, Bing has implemented ChatGPT inside the search bar. So Bing is super popular right now. Bing has their own paid search and their own PMax. And they have built their own paid search in PMax, so you can just export your ads from Google and import them into Bing. So as we're talking PMax, don't forget about Bing PMax too. So I'll just say that.
We have just started to dip our toe in the Bing pool. And so we are seeing some initial results that are very strong. So we are going to continue that work. So I agree with Philip. Don't ignore it and make sure you're taking a look at that and spending some of your budget there if you have the budget available. Next slide. So here you can see Performance Max revenue is shown as cross-network, as Philip mentioned earlier in the presentation. So it's become another source of digital revenue, almost as important as our email revenue in some months. Philip, is there anything you want to add to this one?
No, I just think back to the balanced portfolio. I always worry about email revenue. I really do. I lose sleep over email revenue because I feel like email is going to get harder and harder and harder to raise money and not easier. And so I'm always trying to balance out that email with other things like PMax. Here's direct, here's search. This is looking great. We got 4. We're placing our bets on 4. Here's paid search. There's opportunity in paid search in this month.
So here's a view of the past 12 months. You can see we now have 4 channels, which provide more than $200,000 in revenue each. So organic search, direct, email, and PMax. We are always trying to balance our portfolio of digital revenue to mitigate future risks. So as he explained, we know email is getting more and more crowded. And so we're always looking at these results and we look at them on a monthly basis to see where are we seeing good return on ad spend and where could we be increasing what we're spending to continue to see great results.
I will say, look at what's at the bottom. We always focus on what's at the top. Look at what's at the bottom. Paid social, unassigned, which means we can track it better, organic social. Sometimes people feel like I'm unnecessarily harsh on paid social. And I do want to say that we are finding that paid social can be great for acquisition campaigns. If we get into it in the Q&A, there's a great use of paid meta that we're finding to create 1 or 2-step acquisition campaigns that you can't really do on Google. So, and Meta's full of a bunch of very smart people. And so they're going to keep innovating their technology because they're very aware that people are shifting their spend from Meta to Google because the ROAS is better in Google. They're not going to just sit there still waiting for all of this to happen. They're going to keep. So I think the best strategy for us is let's keep all of our little irons in the fire, if you will, just in case we see a nice ROAS in any month.
Absolutely. All right. And you can bring all these up if you want, Philip. So these are my lessons learned so far. So again, so we only started, that's okay. So like I said, we've only been working with Stella for about a year now, but again, our digital program has grown exponentially. And so we're so appreciative of their support and their expertise, and also have some lessons learned we just want to share with everyone. So don't do this alone. If you have the technical expertise in-house and have some budget, if you don't have the technical expertise in-house and have some budget, get support. It doesn't have to be from Stella, but get support. Don't be afraid to try new things, even if they don't work out. So an example of this is earlier in the year, we tried what was called a click to call campaign. So this was a digital campaign where we tried to have search ads where people could actually click on the ad. And then once they clicked, it would be directed to our telemarketing agency who would then answer that call. The idea was to have inbound prospective donors coming to us, and then we could then engage them and hopefully convert them. It did not go as well as we hoped that it would, but we did gain some insights and we may revisit with a revised strategy. So digital provides endless opportunities for testing and spending a minimal amount to get learnings, and then you can always shift gears as needed. And last but not least, we used to see digital as email and a bit of lead generation. Now we see digital as a whole program on its own, a portion of email, and so much more. And so that is why we're growing the number of people who work on digital. And we know that is where we're going to see a lot of our revenue moving forward. We know that it's getting more and more expensive in direct mail to acquire donors. And so digital will be a place where we're focusing some of our acquisition efforts. And so those are my main learnings for now. Happy to answer any questions as we go through the presentation, or happy to wait till the end because I know Philip has some stuff he wants to share here as well.
Well, let me ask the moderators, do we have questions already in the Q&A for Natalie before I switch gears? Because I'll do a little bit and then we'll do another Q&A, but we could take some questions based on Natalie's content if we have questions. Anybody in the audience dying to ask something of Natalie right now?
I have a question that was sent through. So the question says, could you share any challenges you've encountered while using GA4 to track down donor behaviors, and how did you address them?
Any challenges? So if I may, Philip, share organic versus paid, and we're always having that conversation. So Philip knows that it's important for us to use our ad spend to acquire new donors. We know that it's important to renew existing donors as well, but we saw really great organic results because our brand is relatively well known in Canada. And so we have noticed a shift in some of our organic revenue moving to some of the PMAX and the paid sections. And so I would say that we have an ongoing conversation about how much we're spending and what terms we're using, because we know that donor behavior is they're going to click on the first ad that they see, whether it's a sponsored ad or an organic link. And so we've just been monitoring that very closely and having lots of conversations about where should we be investing money and what terms should we be using. Is there anything you want to add to that conversation, Philip?
Well, no, I mean, further that point, Natalie and her team are very smart when it comes to asking hard questions. That's what I would say, is that they will say, look, this looks great, but what if we hadn't spent anything on paid search and it had all been organic, you know, that kind of question. And we've even done tests where we'll turn off paid search on the brand terms and just allow it to do non-branded paid search. And we will try to measure to see, does it have an overall impact? Our Google Ads expert generally doesn't like when we do that, because she really wants us to be training the Google algorithm in the search terms that are important to us. It's like we're training a robot. We're trying to train the robot on what kind of traffic we want, what we're looking for, so that the more and more we use AI, it'll know what to send us and know what not to send us. So I would say we test these questions, but we veer on the side of continuing to buy paid brand because they tend to be the sweetest donors of all. Could we have gotten it organically? Don't know. Are we wasting a ton of money with this? No. I mean, if we end up spending a little bit on some clicks that would have been organic, I'll sleep okay at night, and I think Natalie will too, as long as that overall revenue keeps growing.
For sure. I agree.
Were there more questions, Erica or Carolina?
Yes. So there are a few questions in the Q&A. I'll read them out loud for you. We have a question from Jessica. Did you purposely target new customers in June, or was that a general campaign?
So we are always targeting new customers. So we have an always on campaign that's targeting just the generally, and so that can include new and existing donors. And then we always have a campaign that we're running where we're specifically targeting new donors. And so we're always comparing the results there. And then again, because of UTM tracking, we can actually look at the always on spend and then compare to see what percentage is new versus existing, and then also compare that to the new only campaigns. So we run multiple campaigns at any given time to see the results that we're seeing. And again, support from Stella helps us be able to do that. But we were running both a new donor campaign as well as an always on campaign, as well as some special campaigns in June because we know it's a peak month for us and more people are engaged in Indigenous content throughout the month of June.
It does get a little more complicated, as Natalie is suggesting. It starts out real easy, where we've got one Google Ads campaign, one donation form, simple, right? As you start adding campaigns, we start adding donation forms too. You know, when I was showing you the fundraise up coming in as items, we need to be able to tease apart in any period of time, not just what we were spending, who we were spending it with, but what happened with that spend. So we have to start kind of making it a little more sophisticated than that one donation form. We start needing a bunch of different donation forms, and we need to be able to track it easily without too much overhead on the team. Natalie's team is very quick. They're not huge. Like she said, 3 people. It just grew from 2 to 3. It's not a gigantic team of people. So we do need tools that are relatively easy for us to set up and configure and launch.
Perfect. We have one more question. I mean, two more. So this one is asking about SEO and SEM. So it says SEO and SEM for donation is competitive. Do you have any suggestion on it?
That's a Philip question.
Is that me?
That's you, Philip.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do? Not compete? I mean, that would be what I would say is, of course, you're going to compete. You're going to compete in the inbox. You're going to compete with search. You're going to compete with, you just need to be in the game. Let me say this. You don't need to be cutthroat and start buying the terms of your competitors. You don't have to go there. People always ask, do we have to? You don't have to. But make sure you own your own terms. Make sure you own your own brand. You should always be using these tools. You should use all the tools all the time. The question becomes, how much money do you spend on it? That's based on your budget. I don't know what your budgets are, but you should always be doing paid search, always, like every day. You should always be thinking about your website content. You should be, in a perfect world, looking at, Natalie mentioned it a couple of times, you can integrate your Google Search Console with your Google Analytics 4 account, so that when you're inside of your Google Analytics 4 account, you can say, hey, what were people, I see all this organic search traffic. What were they asking? How did they spell our brand terms? What spaces did they put in the words? This helps us structure the content of the website so it becomes this nice virtuous cycle. So I would do all of it all the time. The question becomes, how much time do you have to do it? I don't know. Do you have 1 person? Do you have 2 people? Do you have 10 people? Some teams in Canada have big teams now. They got big teams just on organic, you know? So don't be intimidated just because you don't have a big team to do a little bit. Google Analytics 4 is not so hard to learn. Google Search Console, Google Ads, PMax is the easiest digital ad campaign to set up I've ever seen. You don't need an agency. I will tell you this as you don't need an agency to run your own PMax campaigns. Okay. Is there one more question or should I move on, Erica and Carolina?
There's one more question in the contacts and then I'll let you move on.
Okay.
So this one is, if you're worried about email revenue, where do you think this revenue is going to move towards? Any predictions?
That's you, Natalie.
Well, I would say it's going to be in the areas where we're seeing growth, right? In Performance Max, in Google Ads. We've seen a little bit of success with some stuff we've been doing in Meta more recently. And so, yeah, like depending on how much, I know Stella continues to encourage us to send more email, but we are getting more feedback from donors that it's too much email. Not a ton of feedback, but a little bit. So just has us asking that question about how much email is too much email. And so I see the revenue shifting to other sources of digital revenue. I'm not sure, Philip, where do you see it going?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, look, you remember when we were all excited back in the dot-com bust about one-to-one personalization? We really are still there. I mean, to the email point, for some segments of Inspire's email list, we need to send more email. For some segments, we need to send less. The trick is figuring out who's in which segment, okay? And we've got tools now. You know that MailChimp has AI segmentation built into it right now? So it will create AI-driven segments based on user behavior. That's an example of MailChimp. It's like AI really does help us do things that would have taken a big team in the past. We can do with very small teams now. So I think in all of our digital channel tools, they will become AI enabled, which will allow us to further segment our content and relationships. We won't have time on this webinar. One of the team at ST has shown me this AI podcasting software. And so I always like to create podcasts, or try to at least. Well, she took 2 reports, fed it into AI, and it created this conversation between a man and a woman that sounded real. And I thought, well, now I'm out of a podcasting job. But any use we can use of these tools to create more content and more personalized interactions is good for the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, shall I move on? Moderators, are we good?
Yes.
Natalie, good for now? All right, let's move on. Stella. Natalie has said it a few times. I've mentioned it. Stella is an agency. It's based out of Toronto. It's pure digital. It's built kind of inside of ST. Some of you may know ST or Stephen Thomas as a direct mail, direct response fundraising agency that's been around for 40 years. What we're trying to do with Stella is we're trying to take all of that learning from direct response fundraising and apply it in a digital first fashion for our clients. Because to Natalie's point, we find many clients, most of their direct response revenue is coming from direct mail, but the fastest growing segment is digital. So how do we look at this pie, not as 2 separate pieces, but as one integrated piece of audience? And how do we really help the client stimulate the digital piece while at the same time respecting the direct mail piece and treating people as one person in all of our communications? My role is to be the managing director of the Stella team. And what I try to do with all of our clients is just what Natalie and I are talking about. Let's first start with your data. Every client's a little bit different, but everybody's got Google Analytics 4. Some of it's not set up right. Some of it is. Whatever, we'll fix that. Let's look at your data. Let's look at your last 12 months, and that'll give me a fingerprint. It's like I can see what you are good at, and I can see where your opportunities are very quickly. Then we work in kind of a collaborative Scrum fashion with the team. Our whole goal is to knowledge transfer to the nonprofit team. As much as some on our team would like us to be around forever, really, we're just trying to stimulate digital revenue, teach the team, develop fluency, and kind of lean in where they need a little bit of help, okay? And I do like to scuba dive. That's why I put that picture there. I find it very peaceful to go underwater, very quiet. Okay, do we all know who this is? I don't think they can chat in this webinar. Tom Cruise, okay, hopefully. If you're young, you might not know who Tom Cruise is, whatever. Do you know what movie this was? Do you remember the movie? I'll tell you in just a second because I can't get votes in this format. This movie dealt with precogs. The women floating in that liquid were precogs. They were trying to find pre-crime, and it was called Minority Report. Okay, so the whole idea of Minority Report is that Tom Cruise was a cop who would get premonitions from the cogs, the precognitions, and they would go and avert the crime before it happened. So why am I showing you slides of an old movie? Because I think we can look for pre-donors in our data at this point. I think we're having a fundamental shift in the way we're using data as fundraisers. And so I just wanted to kind of set up in a fun way to say, how will we find pre-donors with all these cool tools out there now? What about these pre-donors? Our whole direct response industry has been built on some very simple math, which is recency, frequency, and monetary value, RFM scoring. Most very sophisticated algorithms boil down to these 3 variables in a file, in a list, in anything. It's RFM, recency, frequency, monetary. And I'm not saying anything bad about RFM. I think RFM is still the best. If you've got data on the past history, boy, that's the way to go. However, we have to understand that we are driving by looking in the rearview mirror using RFM scoring and CRM data. So when I'm doing that, I'm looking backwards. What did Natalie do last year? What has Natalie done in the last 3 years? It's not really saying, what do I think Natalie's about to do? Just right now, what is she about to do? But now we've got tools where we can start to see this. The donor database, we call it CRM. You know, we call it Blackbaud. We call it Salesforce. It's the center of our universe when we're fundraisers. You know, in our nonprofits, we've got a database. We'll call it the database of record. It'll be the core CRM inside of any data system. And we're trying to shove all the data into our database because we want to keep track of the fact that Natalie likes to give on Thursdays at 2 p.m. She gives to Giving Tuesday. She likes matches, whatever. We're trying to get her to give another gift by storing all of this information. But what I'm finding with our clients and with the systems out there is there's just too much data and it's not going to fit into our databases. Like no matter how good we are, we're not going to be able to shove it all into our CRM data. There's so much data. For example, as we look to a system like Fundraise Up, how is it coming up with those suggested giving amounts? It's looking at your browser type. It's looking at the version of your iPhone. It's looking at your IP address. It's looking at time of day. It might be looking at weather in your location. We can't store all this data. There's too much data it's looking at to make those suggestions to now store it in the CRM. So we're going to have to shift our strategies a little bit. And I find it's exciting to shift these strategies. It's driven on data. We all love data. But what we're seeing now is we're using data differently. So I mentioned funnels a little bit before. I like to kind of simplify all of this into a funnel. When I look at your website, I see this. In my mind, I see this. Maybe I see your Google Analytics, but I definitely see a funnel. And in that funnel, I'm trying to bring people to your website as much as I can. And I'm trying to pull them down that funnel so that money flows out the bottom. Because usually people hire me and our team to drive more online revenue. They're not necessarily hiring us to create brand impression. They're hiring us because they want to drive more revenue. So to use the funnel metaphor just for a second, up at the top of the funnel, they've never heard of your organization. They just don't know you. Down at the bottom of the funnel, they are a monthly donor visiting your website frequently. So if you'll kind of play with that idea, somewhere along this funnel, we're trying to kind of move your traffic. So what we can do with the digital tools we've got, we can move them from never heard of you. We can show them an ad on Google or Meta or Bing or TikTok or LinkedIn or wherever you want to try to show that ad. So there's at least an impression of your brand. We can try to drive them to your website. So we get what's called the first visit. You know, there's a time when you first visit a website and you're seen as a new visitor to that website. We can try to have great content or great usability on that page, what I'll call a landing page, so that you spend a little bit of time on that landing page, maybe more than a minute. On mobile devices, if we have time to get into it, it's hard to get a minute, but we'll go for 40 seconds. Okay, so we're really just trying to get some interaction on that content. Maybe we get them to click a donation button. Maybe we get them to start a donation but not complete it. And then if we've got good systems, we'll do what's called shopping cart recovery. And we'll come back and say, hey, Natalie, I know you almost finished this gift. It's still waiting for you. We would so appreciate if you just kind of click here and complete the gift. Okay. And that would be complete donation. So that's the funnel. And then the whole goal is we're able to analyze and therefore optimize this funnel with data like Google Analytics 4 data, with data like Fundraise Up Insights data, with data like Meta Ads Manager data, with data like Google Ads data. All this data is out there and it helps us complete the funnel in an efficient way. The trick sometimes is not always starting at the top of the funnel. Sometimes I find clients are way up here spending tons of money on what I'll call brand impression, but they haven't really focused on the bottom of the funnel, which is the conversion step. And so generally speaking, and again, oversimplification here, we start at the bottom of the funnel and we work our way up because that's the best use of the client's limited budget, okay? And I think that's it. And I think now we can take questions. Oh, 12:45, good. I think that's all of the content really. And if you've got questions, please ask. We're here. We can stay till the top of the hour, or we can all give you all 15 minutes back of your life to get something done. So please feel free. Thank you very much, Natalie, for joining me in this. And I'll open it up for questions.
I just put a question on the chat that is really relevant to what you just went through with funnels. I just put it there for you because it's a little long of a question.
Okay, let me just pop out of here. Are you seeing my screen? What are you seeing in the chat?
Yes, we can see your screen.
What type of data visualizations and real-time actionable data have you implemented in GA4 through explorations to provide insights into the health and I mean, it's a very sophisticated question. It is Okay, can I make a general comment, which is I find that people create too many dashboards, generally speaking, okay? Just because you can create a dashboard doesn't mean you should. And what I do find is that people don't spend enough time in what I'll call their raw GA4 data. And as a result, we're missing some of the forest for the trees, if you follow. It's not the case in all organizations. If you're very large and you got big teams and you've got Power BI running and you know your data is good, sure. But for lots of smaller teams, I find they spin wheels building Looker Studio dashboards when really they should just be looking at their GA4 every week and making changes, looking at GA4, making changes. Now, again, I am super simplifying this problem. I love data visualizations like the next person, but sometimes there's little breaks in that chain. You're trying to pump data into your dashboard. Well, the pump breaks a little bit and it's not quite right. And then we start doing all this. Why does this not add up to this? Why does marketing tell me this is what's happening in Meta, but these guys tell me this? It's because we're not using what I call source data. Let's just use source data coming right out of GA4, coming right out of Fundraise Up, and simplify. Generally speaking, we're simplifying, we're not creating more complexity. So I don't know if that answers your question, really. We do look at the stages of the funnel generally in any data to say, what's going on at the top? What's going on at the bottom and what's going on in between? Where are we losing people? What's the leak? Where's the leak in our funnel? And what can we do to improve that? Any other super sophisticated questions like that? Or basic questions? How about an easy question?
I popped another one in the chat for you.
Okay, great. In the chat? Okay, hold on a second. And then I've got up here too, I don't know if we have a lot of time. Here is Indspire's GA4 data, and here is their FRU data, Fundraise Up data. And I just thought I'd show you, like most of our Scrum meetings use two dashboards, those two, okay? Nothing more. You know, it's pretty simple. We look at the time period. I've kind of got a time period, July 1 to July 1, in both screens here, July 1 to July 1. You can see that the million here, not all was recorded because it wasn't all set up. We actually raised more than that, 1.2, that makes sense. But all we're trying to do now is we're trying to go through what I call the transactions data in Fundraise Up to make sure you can see we're breaking down the 1.2 into first installments of monthly giving plus one-time donations. Okay, that explains part of the picture. Then we're looking at performance of the AI system. How many saved recurring plans did AI help us with? What percent were mobile users? We didn't really go into detail about mobile data. Mobile's really hard. It's hard to convert mobile, but if you can get really good at mobile, most of your audience and your website that we see over here is mobile, which we can see down here in the tech. And then I will get to the question, I promise. But look at this in the last 12 months of this. Here's the device category view. Look at that mobile data. You see, it's a big single chunk. Here's desktop. Desktop gives more. We can see this. Desktop is going to make us more money, but the biggest growth area opportunity is in mobile. So we just got to keep watching this inside of our transaction systems to make sure that our mobile percentage keeps growing. It's not shrinking. Time of day mapped out so we can get a sense, when should we be sending email? When should we not be sending email? Payment frequency. Are we doing all one time, monthly? Hey, could we implement every 4 weeks and get an extra payment every year? Let's try, let's explore. A lot of the Americans are exploring annualized tribute donations. Could we get a recurring gift on an annual basis? Payment methods, as we move mobile, we're doing Apple Pay, we're doing PayPal, we're doing pre-authorized debit, Google Pay. So payment types explode a little bit if we get really good at mobile. So I'm just a little bit of the overall, here's what we're looking at. And then we're comparing it to GA4 because GA4 is always going to have more information around where did that traffic come from than we could ever get from a donation system.
Philip, we have a question saying, what are some of the key web events in GA4 that you use to measure aspects of the funnel you mentioned? So I was hoping maybe you could share it right there and highlight some of live on the screen.
I don't think I will do that right now because it's Natalie's data, but I think it would be pretty obvious to most people as you're looking at your GA4 data, how to start seeing the leaks at different parts of your funnel. That's all I'll say at this point. It's not rocket science. Can I say that? Sometimes we try to pretend like digital fundraising is like rocket science. It is not rocket science, and it's not brain surgery. We can dive in here. We can do basic things. We can measure and we can repeat. My encouragement to all of you is don't overcomplicate this. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. And I will say one more thing. Last click attribution, you're going to get into big fights about attribution. Just use last click attribution. I'm not saying never spend on Meta. There's a role for billboards. Where are we going to measure that in our attribution cycle? Okay. Of course, there's role for brand. Just do last click attribution and keep spending based on that. Generally, here's one more throwaway. Most teams are underspending in their digital ad budgets. If you look at the M&R report, I think it's saying 25 cents of every dollar should be spent back into the digital ad budget. I don't see that very often. I see most organizations underspending overall on their digital ad budget. Natalie is nodding along. Do you want to add anything, Natalie?
I do see another question here where they're asking what metrics within GA4 have you found most effective for guiding digital funnel strategies and fundraising? And so I did want to just mention, again, UTM tracking is an absolute must for you to be able to see some of the metrics that we are seeing. And so for us, of course, it's always cost to acquire. What is our average gift? What is the ROAS? So return on ad spend, and of course the revenue. And for us, we're always measuring new versus existing. And we are only able to measure these things because of our UTM tracking. So you must be doing UTM tracking to measure that effectively. But that's what we're looking at. If we're seeing one campaign perform exceptionally well with a high average gift and a low cost to acquire, we're going to want to invest more in that area. So it's very similar metrics that you would be looking at in sort of any other fundraising channel. I'm not sure if there's anything else, Philip, you want to add to that, but that's what
I just want to underline one thing your team is very good at is going back in the data and saying how many of these people were new to file, new to the donor database. And boy, that's been an insight. And I find a lot of teams don't do that. They just see it overall as a digital revenue bucket, but it's so important to tease apart the new one versus someone that is returning. And then as we kind of look at our ROAS, thinking about that in two different buckets. And I think your team is really good at doing that part. And we are delighted in what we find when we do that. The number of new people, new to file, new to database, who are not just coming in as one-time, but monthly donors through even acquisition campaigns where we're trying to get email addresses and postal addresses. They're donating. So I think now your brand is a very good brand. Like not all brands are the same. So that's why I say every client's a little bit different. You're going to be good at different things. Your brand is going to resonate differently. Indspire is a particularly strong brand, strong and growing brand in Canada. So I feel like the wind is at your back as we're spending into this digital ad space. Any other questions? Here's a question. Okay, let me just look at this chat here. Question from Sharon McCauley. Is Fundraise Up a CRM or is it a tool that works with a donor database? Okay, very good question. Fundraise Up is a donation system. So the whole idea is they try to be what I call a point solution, really good at capturing donations. You're going to need to pump it into a CRM. After you take it in through Fundraise Up. Fundraise Up I would not use as my CRM. I would pump it into Blackbot or pump it into Salesforce. A lot of people are starting to use HubSpot right now, which I think is very cool. You're going to need another database to pump it into for long-term care and feeding.
I believe these are, oh, another one just came through. It's in the Q&A.
If I have a HubSpot kind of advanced donations, I mean, this kind of result. Okay, well, yeah, okay, old-fashioned. Good. No, this is good. Yeah, fine. So let's not get so fancy here, okay? Let's just kind of come right back to, I don't know, Donor Perfect. I don't know what you're using. Bloomerang, eTapestry. Fine. Listen, I like those old brands. I'm kind of retro, back in the day, that's what we were using. You don't have to have all the new tools, but I think you'll make your life a lot easier by just kind of leapfrogging into something like Fundraise Up rather than trying to twist your donation form. I mean, that's truly it. It's like use some of the new tools where you can. For example, I'm not saying replace your donor database. That's a hard thing to do. Just keep your donor database. Play around with your web presence. Play around with PMAX. That's easy to do. You don't have to change anything. You just need to make sure you're tracking it. Make sure your Google Analytics 4 is set up properly. Test Fundraise Up as an example. Easy to drop into an old website and make it look all fresh and new. Those would be 3 easy things you could almost do before Giving Tuesday, believe it or not. You could do all 3 of those things before Giving Tuesday. And I think it would help amplify whatever's going to happen in Giving Tuesday. AKA Raisin. Fine. Good Canadian company. Do you know what I mean? I would say AKA Raisin I would use with peer-to-peer for sure. It's very good with that. For a peer donation capture with new, maybe I would test it against Fundraise Up. With any of these, when I say Fundraise Up, test it. Don't just take my word for it. Just test it against AKA Raisin. Test it against whatever you're using for donations. See what you think. If you like it, go with it. If you don't, stay where you are. AKA Raisin is perfectly good.
And if I could just add to that, Philip, before we moved to Fundraise Up, we were using OLX donation pages, which is embedded within Razor's Edge and NXT. And we actually did a head-to-head test. So we did a head-to-head test versus our OLX donation pages versus Fundraise Up so that we could then make the case to show that we would see better conversions and better results from using Fundraise Up. So we ran that test, I believe, for around 6 or 7 weeks. And then we compared the results from both platforms. And saw better results from Fundraise Up. So we're then able to make the case to make the transition to Fundraise Up. So I highly recommend you can go on a pilot with Fundraise Up and test it against your existing pages. And it's a pretty simple integration to try.
Maybe last question. I mean, look, we got the questions live. So if you want to throw a question up, you're going to see it. Which channel suggests invest the most? I mean, honestly, if I didn't know anything about you, what I would do right now is I would spend more money than you think you should on paid search, specifically branded paid search, and PMAX in Google. If that's all you do between now and Giving Tuesday, you'll be fine. Natalie, what would you say? If you're just going to spend more on something right now, between now and Giving Tuesday, what would you do?
For us, it would be PMAX, for sure.
PMAX. And then if you want to get fancy, do the same thing in Bing. And I didn't even say Meta yet. You notice I didn't say Meta? It's not number 1 and 2. It would be maybe number 3 or 4. Surprised it's not Meta. I know, because Meta's so easy to create ads in. It's almost like Meta got this lock on the nonprofit market and everybody's spending all this money on Meta. But if you'll look at your return on ad spend, you'll stop spending so much money on Meta. I promise you. You should spend more money on Google and less on Meta. I don't even know you. I don't know what you, I promise you that's going to work. Thank you. You're welcome, Carlson. And thank you all for attending the webinar. Hopefully it was valuable. I really want to thank Natalie for joining me for this. It was a lot of fun. She's like an A+ client. I mean, you know, anything we come out with, ideas, she's like, let's try it. Let's test it. How do we know if it's going to work? So you keep us on our toes, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Philip. It was a joy to do this with you. And truly, like I said, our digital program has grown leaps and bounds. And again, I started in 2020, and we only started working with Stella in 2023. So there was 3 years there where we were trying to get things going. And so we finally, were able to take that next step, and it has helped us raise more revenue. And so really grateful for all the support.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thanks for attending the webinar. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.